This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Wednesday, February 19th, 2020, and my guest is Corey Gaskin of Digital Trends. Hi, Corey. How are you?
Hey, Miriam. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it. Lots of crazy stuff happened this week. We had Mobile World Congress being canceled. I mean, the list goes on. It was just kind of insane.
It was hectic.
And on top of that, we all got to basically handle the Galaxy Z Flip in some way or another. A one-day loan, which is kind of crazy. What is it with PR people right now giving us devices very last minute for a short time? Do you think it's a lack of confidence? What's going on here?
I mean, specifically with the Galaxy Z Flip, it sort of comes off that way. A lack of confidence, perhaps, in the product. But also, I don't want to go that far, maybe, because even in my 24 hours, it seemed pretty good. And I'm not seeing too much about it being broken just yet, at least not as bad as the Fold was. But I think the main thing was supply. And it's clear that they did not supply many for customers or for reviewers. So they probably just wanted to get quick turnaround so everybody could get them like a day or turn with it. But that's kind of lame too, though, feel like they should have taken that into account. And, it just proves that this is a very niche device that even like reviewers can't get much hands on.
But it's not the messaging around it, right? The messaging around it is, this is a phone, we make it, it folds. It's the folding phone for everyone is kind of the vibe I got from.
Me too.
I don't know.
Me too.
I mean, that's kind of why I'm like, okay, the supply thing I think is a genuine issue. And I can see that probably resulting in the PR strategy we've seen around this. But at the same time, I feel like shouldn't you have planned for that? Aren't you a big enough company? I can kind of understand Moto might have a harder time, but it's Samsung. Come on, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Which means, like I said, it feels like it means it just was like, it was more of a niche device than they were, leading it on to be. And that's fine. It's more of an experiment, and I see that. But yeah, they're definitely not, posing it as such. The real thing that they're saying is it's for style. That doesn't, which is, I guess, their euphemism for saying it's a niche device, but not really having to say, you may experience drop shipments, for instance, like drop releases and things like that. So, and like very, very few. I think the most that I heard in stock for somebody, because many people just went and bought it that day too, many reviewers that I know. And I think when they got to places that actually had it, the most I heard in stock was 2.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I missed that boat. I really didn't think the supply was going to be so limited. And so as a result, I just didn't order right away. And because I thought like I was like, Moto, okay, I get it. Moto is going to be a little crunchier, right? In its supply chain. But I figured Samsung wouldn't have any issues. But I was mistaken. So I'm waiting to actually buy one right now when stock comes back. I'm going to only buy it to test it.
Did you place an order yet?
No, because it's not. You can't even place an order. Best Buy has a crazy return policy I'm not into, because I'm not going to keep this. There's no way I can afford keeping this. So if I order one right now, Best Buy has like a $45 return policy, like restocking fee or something. It's crazy like that. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, on phones they do.
Things have changed since I worked there.
Yeah, and so with Samsung's return policy, it's a lot more flexible. But I've heard horror stories of people trying to return their phones and not getting their money back and stuff. So Samsung customer service. I mean, look, I don't want to spend more time talking about PR strategy and marketing and inventory here. No, I'm serious. I think this is an important discussion to have, and I'm a little just flummoxed, I guess, that they had such a hard time supplying us with devices. But that being said, you've spent time with one more than a day, I believe, right?
No, just a day, actually. I just had that 24-hour loan period, and I did actually place an order that day on Best Buy. Now you're making me feel like I'm going to regret it, but I placed an order, and it still doesn't, I don't know when I'm going to get it, but yeah. So I got to have the 24 hours with it. That was pretty great. I mean, they really, I think the other side of why they, sorry to get back into strategy here for just a quick second. I think the other side of
No,
why
that's
they really
cool.
did that though is, yeah, because you know what, it plays into it, because it's kind of clear that like in 24 hours, you're not going to have a lot bad to say about a device that seems to be executing things pretty well.
Yeah, I want to be clear to people who are listening. I mean, you guys all know me and listening on the show right now because you've listened for years, but I'm not negative here about the Z Flip. I actually feel this phone is the one in terms of finally kind of nailing a decent experience for everyone.
Yep.
You know, of course it has its caveats and it's going to be a different experience than using a, you know, candy bar phone like we've been using forever now, like a slab of glass and metal that doesn't fold. So, I mean, there are some issues here that are specific to this phone that I don't think are, you know, bad per se. So you sound like you've had a pretty good experience for the one day you used it. I've only had it in hand for a few minutes. So I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, I mean, you know, right when you pick it up, it feels pretty solid. It's like got a good heft to it. It feels kind of well balanced, and you see that it like looks good and is made of pretty premium materials. And then when you flip it open, it has a really nice stiff range of motion, but not too stiff that you can't actually just flick it kind of open if you needed to, just with a little extra oomph. Like to compare it to the Motorola Razr, the Motorola Razr was just like kind of floppy in comparison and didn't have a lot of resistance. It's not meant to stay within that range of motion between 90 and 180 degrees as the Flip is meant to, because they want you to be able to set it down on a table and, you know, use it like an impromptu tripod. And so it's more rigid.
And that's really a cool feature, right?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love that's what they did with that form factor, because that's you know, I'll be honest, it doesn't afford a ton of new ways to use your phone. I mean, physically, yes, it's a new way to use your phone, because nobody's ever been able to just prop their phone up like a little laptop on the you know, not since maybe like the like LG V series of like actual flip phones back in the day. But in the modern time, this is a pretty cool way to like interact with a full beautiful screen. So it doesn't change a ton in terms of the user interface. They do have that flex mode thing that like makes the bottom half, essentially just extends the bottom half to be a different thing than what's going on the top half, like the camera.
Yeah, it just adjusts based on the angle of opening to optimize the UI, which I think is really cool, actually. To me, those are the features I think that stand out.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the reality is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've, again, only had limited time with the Z Flip and limited time with the Razr as well. But my gut feeling is that these are phones you can't really open with one hand easily, right?
I disagree. I could open it pretty well with one hand. Like I said, it just takes a little extra oomph just to kind of like give a little momentum to the flip, so that like with your wrist, so that it flips open for you.
Interesting.
But if you do that, I mean, I have rather large hands, I guess you could say, like medium to large hands. So I guess it could be a little easier for me because it is a pretty long device. But I was able to open it with one hand pretty easily. And I did over and over again.
Awesome.
So I had it for the 24 hours, and I was just like running around the city trying to take pictures, trying to just like use it. I was like in Ubers, out of Ubers, navigating, taking pictures, flipping it open, sending texts, figuring stuff out. And I mean, yeah, number one, it was just so satisfying to do, to like open the phone and close it again. And I oftentimes would just close it with two hands, especially if I was like walking around and navigating. And I was like, all right. And I would just like kind of take my other hand and just kind of close it, just like, you know, like a makeup compact, just real quick, and it just like felt good. I don't know, it's just like this weird, like I in my review, like 24-hour little review thing, I mentioned that it's almost like getting a small dose of ASMR, like when you close it.
I saw that, and I'm linking that in the show notes, folks. So if you're following at home, and you're not driving or something right now, click on the link and have a look at the same time as you listen to the show. You know, it's interesting. I'm glad you were telling me this, because my gut feeling was that these two phones were going to be hard to open with one hand. So knowing that you can open them with one hand is good. And can you close them with one hand? You said you weren't, but was that on purpose or just because you couldn't?
It was, you could do either. I could definitely close it with one hand. But again, I do have like kind of larger hands, but I could close it with one hand pretty easily. But I just ended up closing it with the other hand just because, I don't know, just the way that when I was like walking, I think it was literally just a matter of, it was just instinct, really. I think maybe I would be too scared to close it with one hand while I was like walking around over concrete, you know?
It's funny to me, I'd just be scared of opening it with one hand as well. Like,
I'll be honest, it was very cold that day. And I was getting very worried because I could not feel my hands. So opening it was a little scary, but only because I couldn't feel my hands.
Wow.
But otherwise, it felt, yeah. So that's something you kind of think about in the back of your head, like, especially since you only had 24 hours and it's not yours. But
it comes with a protective kind of shell, doesn't it?
The ones that we got didn't actually.
Okay. So you really didn't even have that as a backup even, right?
No, which is strange because we probably could have used it, but I think it does come in the retail packaging, like a clamshell kind of case for it, a 2-piece case.
Yeah, like they had very similar, I think, to what they had for Fold. Yeah,
right.
It just kind of clamps on both halves, basically.
Yeah.
And gives it a little bit, probably more like scratch protection than drop protection. And that's generally how I handle cases on my devices. I don't do it for like dropping in the phone protection. I do it for just scuffing the phone. You know, that time when you drop the phone and nothing's going to break, but you're going to get some cosmetic, scratches from the concrete or whatever. And instead, your $20 case takes the grunt of that, and you can buy another $20 case, and you're back in business, Yeah,
I don't even use a case, so
I didn't used to for a long, long time. And considering I've been reviewing phones since like 2005, I have only dropped, I think, 2 or 3 review units in that period of time. I average about 50 phones a year that come on my desk that I use. So like, that's not bad, but the ones I did drop never actually broke to the point where I had to, they weren't working anymore. But I've had some cracked glass, and I've had some scuffs that happened before I had my photos taken. So I've had, when I was at Engadget, actually happened a couple of times where they sent me a new review unit because I screwed it up. So I mean, but for my personal use
with
now,
the review unit, I agree.
Yeah, for my personal use now, I do use I'm a big fan of the minimal cases by this company called Minimal, and they're pretty thin, they're pretty super thin, like plastic, frosted plastic. So you keep the color and the look and feel of your phone, and you add that basically just kind of it's like almost like a skin,
right?
A very thin skin that protects it from scratches. But I digress.
I think that's kind of like what the case that they include is, like a nice clear case, because here's the thing, it's a really cool looking phone, and I think this about most phones, but especially the Galaxy Z Flip. It has this really nice mirror finish, so like to put a case on it would be like totally understandable, because I am not very confident about the durability of this phone if were it to drop, whether open or closed.
I mean, I think that's true of a lot of phones. I mean, I think that if you're in an apartment or something, wood or carpet, you're probably not going to break a phone today. But if you're dropping it on concrete out in the street, you're going to scratch it at least, if not break something. I mean, that's the reality.
Yep.
So tell me about other things on this phone. First of all, how do you feel about that front display? Because, so the issue I feel for folding phones in general is that, what about those little things you do on your phone that you don't really need the full display for, like checking notifications, answering phone calls, and obviously, 2 different strategies. Well, 3 if you take the Fold, right? So the Fold had the strategy of the entire phone is replicated in front, but the reality was, as Ron Amadeo said in his review on Ars Technica, it's not really usable as the front display on the Fold. Like, it's just too small. Everything's too small.
It's not usable in the sense that you don't want to text or anything from it.
That's what I'm saying. Sure. Like, they build it, Samsung build it as it's a phone when it's closed and it's a tablet when it's open, but both were flawed. And that was kind of what Ron's take was on that.
I have a controversial take on that, actually.
Oh, yeah?
My controversial take. All right. First of all, I'll be honest. Didn't love the Galaxy Fold, but because to me, my personal use for phones, like, it's too big when it's unfolded for me to text comfortably on. And again, I have like decently big hands. It's not an issue of that. It just feels awkward. And also, I don't like the split keyboard. I know you don't have to use it split, but it's also just weird shape to use even if it's not. So whether it's open or closed, I did not enjoy texting on that phone. And that was the
And that's
main
what I'm
reason
saying.
why I
And
stopped using
I
it.
agree with you. And that's what Ron was saying. It's like, it's a bad phone when closed. It's a bad tablet when open. And Android is
Wow.
always a bad tablet anyway. I mean, the reality is like, I think Samsung's probably the closest to making a tablet that's half decent, because they've been doing it for years and they, add all this layer of special software, but it's still nowhere close to an iPad, in my opinion. If you want a good
Right.
tablet today, iPad's pretty much the only way to fly, I think. Unless you want, a convertible or something, and then Windows, I think, does a pretty decent job. But what
I'm looking forward to that Duo then, I bet.
yeah, well, let's see what happens with that, right? But
Yeah.
getting back to the Z Flip and to the Razr, so what we saw the Fold doing one thing for the external display, and then now the Razr did, and the Flip are basically the same form factor. Essentially, phones that when open are the size of a phone that fold in half into your pocket. And the Razr has this pretty large front display for what the device is. And then the Z Flip has a really tiny little display. So what was your experience comparing the two, and which one do you like better?
I actually didn't get a Razr review unit, and I'm still waiting
neither
on
did
mine.
I, so don't worry.
It another issue of supplies, that's for sure. But just
You've
before
used it, though, is what I'm saying.
just at the initial hands-on, but just going based off like the initial outside screen, because once we get into the inside screen, it's a different ball game entirely for these two.
Yeah.
But we'll get there, I'm sure. But on the outside screen, Motorola wins there only because it has like a bigger, more useful screen, and it's a touch screen, and you can kind of interact with it. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you can actually respond through text. Yeah, you can, through like quick replies, through text messages.
Yeah,
through
they
the
have
front.
all these, basically if you have Moto software on a normal Moto phone today, like a recent Moto phone, all of that stuff you can do in the lock screen before unlocking your phone works basically on the front screen on the Razr, which I think is a very clever thing.
Yeah.
But my real question is, do you feel that the Z Flip is limited by that tiny little display? Is it still perfectly usable, or do you feel like it should be bigger?
Me personally, it depends on who you ask, because one way you can look at it is that it's kind of minimizing how much you have to or will be able to interact with your phone, and kind of gives you like just a little bit more impetus to be like, nah, let me not open my phone, because maybe you get a notification and you can see what kind of notification it is in most instances, and then maybe you can just be like, I don't care, or whatever. You just get just a little slight nudge more to maybe not open and see what it's about, because now you got to open your phone next. But if it's an important notification, of course, then, it's like you can, like, for messages, you see a little ticker thing, but it's such a small screen that like a message that's longer than 3 words, it has to scroll across, and it just takes longer than it's worth.
So by then you
flip the
opened it
screen
up.
open
Yeah,
and
yeah.
seen it. And
So you feel that it's
Exactly.
okay, and it helping you be less immersed in the phone basically right now? Like, are you feeling like it's helping you there?
sure.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's not bad, but it could potentially be better, right?
It could definitely be better. Me personally, I would prefer a bigger, more useful screen, because I would like to be able to use, just like how Motorola kind of had some experiences you can use on the outside, I would like more, so that it's almost like you can use it closed or open just for like basic things like texting or navigating, or, like the 2 or 3 things that you do like the most and don't want to always be flipping open for, like a text that comes in, a navigation comes in. Those 2 or 3 things would be great. But I mean, they do have stuff like you can use it as a viewfinder, which worked pretty well, I thought, to take selfies, so you don't have to open the phone for that. And I thought that worked really well. It just, if it was a little bit bigger, then it would definitely be more useful. But otherwise, it's fine. That's my only.
What about using it once it's opened and it's basically a real phone, like a normal phone in a way, when it's open? Do you feel that like it just feels like my gut feeling when I used the Z Flip at the demo area in San Francisco for the launch last week was that if, spec wise and experience wise, is very much like a slightly larger Galaxy S10e,
Right.
If you look spec wise, it's pretty much that, especially with that fingerprint sensor mounted on the side. So do you feel that, like, was it just fine? Like, it's just a phone and everything is just exactly the way you expected? It feels in hand like a normal phone, balance-wise and everything else?
Yeah, honestly, that's the beauty of it. Aside from the initial satisfaction of flipping open your phone, when it's open, it's basically just a phone.
Yeah.
And, like, that's, exactly what they're going for, and kind of how they hit it. And, it's a slightly tall screen, but I didn't really pay much attention to it or have any real pause about it when I was using it. Again, some if anybody hasn't gotten it by now, my hands are sort of large, so I didn't have any issue with the size of the screen. This is going to be the name of the show.
My hands are sort of large. I don't name the shows, but so you're lucky. You're getting out of this one. But
oh, thank God, because that is the theme. For
yeah,
sure.
It's kind of funny.
I can't stress it enough, guys.
Yeah, I mean it's fair.
So yeah, it was like a total normal experience, and that's what I liked. I didn't care about the crease. It's totally forgettable. It's in the center of the screen, which you'd be surprised how little you touch the center of your screen, number one. And number two, when you're looking at it straight on, you really don't see the crease.
Yeah, no, I noticed that. And I mean, the Fold had a crease as well, and it's there, and you just get used to it. It's interesting that the Razr does definitely have less of a crease, a visible crease. So there's something you best
said.
Yeah,
you want to go there?
Yeah, well, we're going to go there in a minute. But I think that there's a lot to be said there. But I think that, it's an interesting design choice, right? They made a display that slides basically, right? In and out of the shell in a way, and kind of teardrops into the hinge, whereas the Z Flip and the Fold are pretty much just creasing, not, much tighter folding of the display,
creasing,
creasing it, right?
Right.
Like pinching it in a way, and it closes a little tighter on the Z Flip than it did on the Fold, which is nice. So you can see them improving. We're going to discuss the whole glass fiasco.
There was a slight controversy, but I think it was cleared up quickly.
Yeah, let's talk about that in a minute. But from my gut was touching it, I definitely felt that compared to the Fold and to the Razr, this was a better tactile experience touching that screen.
Definitely.
Right?
100%, because nobody's really trying, like, you're not pressing hard on a screen ever, really, like not on their phone, so you'll never feel like it's not a glass screen on there, and it is. So it just feels like you're just touching a regular touchscreen, and then if you tap on it, it feels like glass, and it's not lumpy like the Razr. That it's a great idea to have this screen that like is almost like paper, so that it can like contort when it folds flat, but it just didn't feel good like when it's unfolded, and there's a lot going on with that screen that is very problematic.
Yeah,
right
for
now.
sure. So we're gonna get into the two like big stories of the week in terms of the Razr screen issues, and let's be real, the Z Flip screen issues. I said glass fiasco, probably a little too harsh, but we'll get to it, because I do feel like it's not a fiasco. It is not a gate. It's just a lack of, again, communication on the part of the marketing PR team, something we touched upon earlier. Like, it seems to me that Samsung really needs, and Moto to some extent, to really up their game when it comes to communicating with both the media and consumers. And I don't understand how they can't get that right after the Note 7, after the Fold, and well, I'm willing to give Moto a bit more of a pass, because they haven't really messed anything up in the past like before.
I guess.
I'm saying, like, I think
in PR terms, they didn't really do anything wrong.
No, but they didn't handle it very well either. I mean, I'm not taking them off the hook. I'm just saying that I feel like Moto hasn't had like this history of messing that up, whereas I think Samsung does, and I'm annoyed. But when I'm annoyed, that's why I have a podcast, so I can rant and rave. Talk about the rest of the experience in general. Like the cameras, as I said, it feels to me like it's just the Galaxy S10e cameras coming to a Z Flip, basically.
Yeah, the specs on them looked like the same as the S20.
Yeah, they're probably the newer sensors, the new 12 megapixel wide and regular. But I mean, if you look on paper, right, like the 10e had a 12 megapixel ultra wide and a 12 megapixel main. So I think that they're probably the updated versions, but at the same time, it's the same with the Snapdragon, right? It's an 855 plus, not an 855. Right. So there are some improvements, obviously. I mean, you expect that for $1,400, right?
For sure. And that's the thing is like, all right, so just overall package deal with the Galaxy Z Flip, $1,400 is a little tough. But like most phones, I mean, you're going to be paying obviously for the form factor and the little bit of extra tech you're getting there to make that form factor. But, and I don't know, as far as flagships go, like it's $1,000 now is like pretty much.
Yeah, I don't feel it's excessive, honestly. I feel like, I mean, it's still, I mean, okay, relatively speaking, it's not excessive when you say, as you said, when you compare to the other flagships that Samsung's selling, like the S20 Ultra is almost the same price. And if you
Right.
max out the memory on the 20 Ultra, it's even more. So, but I
Uh-huh.
feel like we're also kind of like, where do we stop here, right, Corey? Like, does
Yeah,
does
well, I
next
wanna get
year's
to that.
iPhone cost $2,000 and next year's Galaxy S30
Oof.
cost $2,000? And do we just shrug at that
Oof.
and go, oh, it's only $75 a month on contract? Right now it's about 60,
I know.
right?
That's the thing, is that everything's installment payments now, and it's like, and that's like kind of a cultural thing that's happening with our subscription.
And this
kind
is very
of
US centric kind
culture.
of perspective too, because you know what?
That's
If you live in
true.
San Francisco or New York and your little coffee in the morning costs you $4, you're gonna say, oh well, it was $60 for the S20 Ultra in 2020, and now it's $70 for the S30 Ultra in 2021, which now costs like
Yeah.
$1,700. But it's only 2 coffee drinks, like, a month. I can handle that.
Yeah,
But
more
where
a
do you
month.
stop, right? Like
Right,
that's kind of what
exactly.
I'm worried about. But of course, for the
Yeah.
Z Flip, I'm willing to give it like $400 premium, right? And it's really what you're looking at. It's about $400.
I'm hoping to see it like, yeah, it's like a $400 premium to have this really cool device. And honestly, if I was a Galaxy fan, I think it would be worth it for me. I would, like, if I was like an ardent Galaxy user, like I'm not a Galaxy fan. I love what they do, but I don't use them personally as my main device. If I did, I'd probably get the Z Flip. And I mean, I'd definitely get the Z Flip, I'll be honest. If I used a Galaxy S10 or even an S20, I'd probably just get the Z Flip instead, because going back to the cameras real quick, the only thing you're missing is the telephoto. So you're missing like the optical zoom for up to 3 times, which is like fine, and like the bigger sensors for more detail capture,
Yeah.
which is another like fine feature for being able to like crop in really tight and not lose much detail even after the fact. But I don't find myself doing that much. I don't know if I was able to more, maybe I probably would. But for now, I value for this year or for the next year or two until I upgrade my next phone, I value having this cooler thing more than having really just, I don't know. To me, it's mostly just the cameras that you're getting out of the S20's range
Yeah.
more than you're getting, because I don't really care about 5G or whatever else. Like, I don't have it. It's not really that widespread.
I feel
So it's the camera.
if you're the
so,
average user today, and you want something different, you're willing to pay the premium. I think the Z Flip is the way to go too, because like most people, like honestly, if you're gonna have only 2 cameras, to me, it's ultra wide and the regular. I don't care about the telephoto as much.
Definitely.
So that's why I think
Agreed.
Apple made the right decision on the S11, and that's why I think Google did the wrong decision on the Pixel 4. But
Yeah.
actually, I think Google made the wrong decision on Pixel 4 because at that price point, it should have 3 cameras. Okay, in my opinion, like let's
Yeah.
not beat around the bush. I've talked
Tough.
about this at length in the show. I'm so sick of it. But that's why I carry a Pixel 4 XL as my main phone, and along with a iPhone 11 as my secondary, because that way I get the best of both worlds.
There you go.
I get the great video from the
yeah.
iPhone, I get the ultra wide from the iPhone, and then everything else is on the Pixel. I know that's weird, but we're phone nerds, and my listeners, a lot of them
Yeah.
are phone nerds, so I think they can relate. But
I feel you. I feel like I'm an outlier. I carry one phone. I only carry, people are going to hate this, but I carry an iPhone. I use the iPhone 11 Pro for a couple reasons. I mean, I'm glad that the camera's finally like probably the best. I think it's the best in the game right now, if not very, very close. But that's
yeah, I
that's
mean,
the
look,
main
I don't
reason
think it's
for
a
me.
bad choice. And I've always been a big fan of iPhones, and I recommend them to people. I just have issues with iOS and the whole ecosystem lock-in. And that's why I prefer
Yeah.
Android. But I honestly, if I had to buy a phone to do everything right now, I'd really have a hard decision to make. It wouldn't be a Pixel, even though I've long time Pixel and, Nexus user here. But I feel like it would be an iPhone 11 Pro, probably the Max, or it would be maybe that Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra now, or some kind of OnePlus phone, because pure Android and relatively decent overall in every way. Or maybe I'd go crazy. I actually don't think I would, because let me explain where I was going with this before I get into detail. I was thinking Huawei. But hear me out. Every Huawei phone that I've reviewed lately, I put GMS on, so it's fine. Like I can use them, it's fine. But Google Pay doesn't work
Right.
because GMS phones, well, when you re-enable GMS on the Huawei phones, they look rooted to Android. So they're not, but they do look like they've been tampered with, basically. And so if you know that if you unlock the bootloader on any Android phone, Google Pay stops working, right? You don't have to root the phone. There's a lot of things you can do to your Android phone that make Google Pay stop working. And apparently taking any Huawei Honor phone that have been released without GMS and putting GMS back on is pretty trivial. There's a bunch of videos out there if you Google it, but then you don't have Google Pay. And I use Google Pay all the time. So that eliminates Huawei. So I think honestly it'd be a toss between a Samsung and an iPhone for me. And it's sad to say because, or maybe as I said, a OnePlus. It's sad to say because normally I'm not really a Samsung or an iPhone person at all. So,
That's funny because I would say if I didn't have an iPhone, I would use a Samsung phone, and it would, at this point, it would be the Z Flip.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking that too. I'm like, why don't I just call it a day and just buy a Z Flip and be cool for a while?
Honestly, yeah. It'd be really cool for a little bit,
right.
for sure. It'd be so much fun. Like, I'm telling you, after 24 hours, I'm literally having withdrawals for flipping
Well, it's
my
coming.
phone.
I'm getting mine as well. We'll be partying together soon. So let's talk about that controversy.
Man. You're going to probably get yours before me.
I don't know about that. Let's talk about that controversy.
We'll
I called it a fiasco because I love that word, and it's probably a bit excessive. But some people call it Glassgate, some people call it whatever. Again, it's a messaging issue on the part of Samsung. That's a failure on their end, and it's the ultra thin glass controversy. There's been a lot of stuff. So I won't link directly to them because there's a lot of videos that are relevant here. iFixit's teardown. Zach over at JRig Everything has 2 videos. One where he breaks, basically breaks the glass, the display, the plastic, the glass. We'll get to that in a second. Plastic, glass, plastic. And then he also actually tears it down in a separate video. So he does a durability test and then a teardown. All of these can be found on YouTube, but I'll link to an article that Android Police wrote that kind of summarizes it. Basically, they went rah during the presentation, all the marketing material about this being the first phone with an ultra-thin, flexible folding glass. And so, look, it seems sci-fi-ish, but if you've been following the mobile tech trends, you know that a number of companies, including Corning, have been working on this. So it's not impossible. And so we all thought, and especially when we touched it, like you spent a day with it, like it feels really different on the screen compared to the plastic folding phones we've been using, the plastic displays like on the Razr and then the Fold, right? Or even the Mate X, if you've ever touched a Mate X, and I have. It's a different experience. And so we were all like, okay, this is it, right? And then, people started testing it. Not just Zach, others have taken it apart and done durability tests, and it felt like there was basically a plastic layer, at least that maybe the entire screen was plastic, but at least that there was a plastic layer on the top layer. And so
because they were scratching.
Yeah, because it's easy to scratch.
Yeah. So they took a spike or whatever and like we're scratching on it, and it scratched very easily.
Yeah, you uses Mohs scale, which is a hardness scale, and he uses these picks that are different hardnesses, and usually in the Mohs scale 6 to 7 is what a normal glass display starts scratching at, and 2 to 3 was what this was scratching at. So it was much easier to scratch basically. And so the takeaway is everybody's freaking out. Everybody reached out to Samsung and the media are going like, whoa, what gives? What's happening here? Like, to me, what blows my mind, Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, is how could they not anticipate that iFixit and Zach would get at this phone and tear it down?
Yeah, I
they
mean,
know
they
this is coming.
Known.
How can they not plan for it and be completely upfront in their marketing? The takeaway,
and it wouldn't have been that bad for them to just, because what they ended up saying, right, was that there's a plastic layer over the ultra thin glass.
And Zach was confirming that in tearing down, and so now we all know it's a super thin layer of glass underneath plastic, and fair enough, it's ultra thin glass.
Yeah, and I mean, if they just said that in anything that they said about it to media or to anybody, just specifically to media, because we're the ones who are going to tell people like those kinds of finer details, but it's not a bad thing. It's like, you reinforce the glass with like plastic over it, it can help from, if your phone were to drop and shatter, like it's not going to all splinter out into everywhere. And, it's not a bad thing. It's going to be a little less scratch resistant. They didn't have to say that in any of their keynotes or anything, but people could infer, and obviously they would find out as they did.
Like, if I'm being hard on Samsung, and particularly on, their messaging and marketing here, it's not because I don't like what they're doing. It's not because I don't think what they're doing is technically an achievement. I think it is. This is, to me, feels like the first well-sorted foldable display on a device.
Yeah, it feels like the future.
It feels like it could fly. It's just going to take some more, coddling and babying than your normal phone. And that's totally okay. That is totally fine.
Yep.
Now, what I'm trying to get to is that they could have alleviated a lot of this, reactions around this plastic layer if they had been totally clear about it. It wouldn't make the phone less of an impressive achievement on a technical level, because let's call it what it is. They're trailblazing here, Samsung. They're the only ones on Gen 2, and Gen 2 seems to be pretty well damn sorted, okay? So
yeah,
I think that it's just like, how can they step on their own feet like that? Like, I just don't understand the boneheadedness of it all.
They were a little maybe too proud. I'm not sure what the issue was, but they definitely should have. All they had to do was just say, there's plastic over glass, but it is, I guess they just really, really wanted to say this is glass, but like, you still could have said it, like, it's foldable glass, there's plastic on it.
Yeah.
Extra layer of protective plastic, whatever.
And then,
but yeah,
there's also a tweet we saw of someone that bought a brand new device, and it basically got a crack, and it's clearly glass right where the hinge is, right where the crease and the fold happens. The first time they folded it, and they said it was in very cold temperature, and so Samsung immediately replaced the phone, and they haven't had any issues since. But I wonder if that's a one-off thing, or if we have to worry about temperature sensitivity on these displays, right?
Yeah, I'm starting to worry myself too, but yeah, I don't know what they'll do. I feel like if that starts to happen more, they're going to have to continue to do free replacements.
For sure.
Right now, I think it's, like 180 or something like that to do.
119, I think.
Okay, 119?
Yeah, it's actually pretty reasonable.
That's not bad. That's not bad at all. That's really good. I mean, how much is an iPhone? It's like 200
Probably,
something.
yeah. But I mean, you're paying $1,400, so people are probably like, okay, And also you want to appease the fear around this new technology, so I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a balmy 65 degrees here in San Francisco right now, so I certainly can't test this. But you're in a better place to try out this stuff. Somebody needs. I think maybe Zach can do it.
Let me tell you, it was freezing that day. I don't know.
And you had no issues, right? No, you told me your hands were numb.
Crack.
So.
Yeah, my fingers were numb. My face was numb. Yeah, it was very cold out, and didn't crack. So hopefully I'm hoping, but I mean, if it happened so early with so few devices, you have to kind of think that.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's a one-off thing, so I'm not too worried about it. But that was the whole controversy around this, in a nutshell. And I wouldn't read too much into it. If you are listening to this show and you're really gung-ho about the Z Flip, and you're thinking of buying one, or you pre-ordered, or you're going to order, or rather, I shouldn't say pre-order, but you're trying to order, because right now that's really the challenge. Don't stop yourself. I think this is something you need to just be a little more gentle with than your normal candy bar glass slab. But I think that you're going to get a very unique experience, and it probably won't be a bad experience. The other big, related news that we had this week was more drama around the Razr. The Razr is going to has probably been the most drama-full folding phone since the Fold.
And not a great
funny because
take.
I want to repeat this because I know we've talked about the Razr at length over a series of shows now. But when I got my hands on in LA with it, I really felt it was really well baked. Like, I felt like they did a good job. Like, all this creaking sound stuff that people are complaining about, and Raymond Wong at Input had his screen delaminate in the crease area. None of this looked like it was going to be an issue when we were, briefed.
No, it really didn't. I guess, we didn't know what to think, like how this would shake out over time, because at the time it felt pretty good. It didn't really seem that it didn't make all those noises that I'm hearing. Oh man,
it's almost on every phone now. I think because the ones we played with in LA were hand assembled, and the new ones are not, and I can really hear the difference. Like, it was not there in LA at all.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. And maybe the other thing is just the cycled of uses, because that's the other thing. Motorola wouldn't tell you how many like like open and closed cycles it was rated for, and not to say that anybody's getting anywhere near close to like what it is rated for, but or should be rated for, but it's clearly, yeah, over time. Oh man, I heard one that literally just sounds like plastic breaking every time it opens. It's really bad. Like,
Oof.
it was like, so the screen itself on each end of the phone moves,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
because it's pulling and retracting and expanding every time you open and close the phone, because it does that kind of fold up in the hinge, that teardrop that they talk about. So it's pulling the screen into that hinge, in and out every time that it opens, and I could feel it stuttering on the edges of the screen where it was pulling and in the hinge. So it sounded like plastic was cracking. This is like the worst one I've heard, by the way, like in person.
Wow.
It sounded like it was cracking, and you could feel like your finger on this display stuttering across as it tried to expand out to the rest of the phone as you open it.
Well,
so it's getting pretty
let's
bad.
see what happens, because I mean, right now I'll be honest with you that as much as and I talked about this with Michael Fisher over at Mr. Mobile, he feels the same way. It's like the nostalgia factor on the Razr, for those of you who were around when the Razr was a thing, is super high, but none of what we're seeing in terms of durability and specs and features and everything else really,
Right.
and higher cost than the Z Flip by $100, make this, this is a complete no-brainer. The Z Flip is the one you want to go for, like 100%. Plus the fact you can buy it unlocked, and you can buy it on, for all carriers basically at this point. Whereas,
Exactly.
Razrs of Verizon exclusive. It's just, I hate to say this because I'm a big fan of what Moto does, especially I think the G series is brilliant. But
It's great, yeah.
like seriously, ugh.
And I was happy when they came out with the Razr. I was like, oh, look
Me
at
too.
Motorola,
I was like, look at you,
stepping out.
playing with the
Yeah.
big kids finally again.
Yes. Yeah, but
Ah.
then you immediately saw the specs and you're like, oh no.
Well, there's been all these rumors of that flagship coming, so I'm hoping that becomes a hit and there's none of that
True.
weird stuff like, come on, stop with the Verizon exclusives, Moto. What the hell are you thinking? Like, I know you've got this long relationship, but it's only going to hurt you in the US, People want to be able to have choices, and you can't just exclusive stuff all the time like that. Moving on, because I don't want us to run out of time. We have a few news items, but we're still in the folding, in that whole weird form factor, new form factor, the future. I want to talk about this leak we saw of a TCL phone that was going to be shown at MWC that
looks
is
crazy.
expandable.
Yeah.
It slides open in like a drawer, like, the screen is bigger all of a sudden when you slide it.
It was just a render, though, the leak, right? Or like a press image.
Yeah, I think it is. You're right. I'll link to a story from The Verge, but like, it's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't see like a working model of it, or like even a picture of the model. I'm pretty sure. Well, in the leak, at least, it looked like it was like, this is a photo. This is like a product photo, like, made by them.
But they might have shown us something working, or maybe even behind glass. You never know, right?
That would have been so cool, because the way it looks, it does legitimately look like, so it looks like a regular phone, and then the other, so it's two pictures.
On it, like you stretch it out, and it becomes a
double
width phone.
And no, seemingly in the picture, no crease, no. And again, this is like basically like a product render, like not render, but like completely like looks not like an actual device.
It looks CG.
Like,
let's be honest. Yeah.
It's like those CAD. Yeah, it's like those like CAD like mock-ups that people do like on YouTube or whatever, or wherever they do, Twitter. So it looks like that, but it looks like, like a real phone. But that's what it seems to be getting across, is that there's no crease there. It just kind of expands into this double the size. And the only thing I can think how that works is like Schott was the glass maker that was found out to be making the ultra thin glass
on the Z Flip
for Samsung. Yeah. Right. And they, on their website, they have like video of glass that rolls up. So that's the only thing that I could think would happen. Like, it rolls up like a scroll, and then when you open it, it unfurls. Or pull out the screen, it like unfurls like a scroll or something.
I think that's exactly what we're looking at. Yeah, definitely.
That would be crazy though, because man, can you imagine? Like,
Yeah.
that's a lot of. We're worried about these flipping foldable things, but geez, that one's got a lot going on there.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. I just want to note. I'll put a link to the story. Check it out. This is another form factor. This is a reason I'm excited about what's happening in mobile right now, is because we're breaking away from our traditional form factors into other form factors, and I think it's exciting.
Yeah.
Qualcomm launched a new 5G modem, the X60, this week, and it's interesting because it can do aggregation between millimeter wave and sub-6. Christian DeLupa wrote about this on Digital Trends. I will link to it. It's basically the successor to the X55 modem that's currently used for 5G on the Snapdragon 865 device, like the S20 series. And the big news here is that basically it can run all three bands at the same time and aggregate them. So you basically get the best performance possible. Up to 7.5 gigabits per second is what they're talking about, which is insane.
Insane and very, very.
It's going to be like when you're right next to the base station. I mean,
yeah, but how many years do you think it's going to take to get to that? Because
I
think the fastest I saw
version 1 was something rated to be up to 100 megabits. We very rarely saw that, right? Even on the follow-up version. So, but I mean, carrier aggregation makes sense, right? And it's a thing.
It's needed.
And so the other news is that they have a matching new millimeter wave antenna, the QTM 535, if you want to be nerdy. And that's a smaller, better module with better performance, which is, the big challenge for the millimeter wave part of 5G, which, as you know, is super high speed but very short distance kind of, further use in stadiums and airports kind of future. Those require some pretty crazy ass antennas. And so this is going to be a new antenna. So it's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and they are fast. I think the fastest I saw was 2 gigabits per second, which was literally right next to the antenna though.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, they millimeter wave sounds like that's the wave.
I mean, the other thing that I think is really interesting here from a nerdy point of view is this is 5 nanometer, not 7 like previous generations. 5 nanometer chips, folks. That is insane. Holy crap balls, Qualcomm.
Yeah, wow. They're doing it.
I know, right? So anyway, yeah. That's the news from Qualcomm, and I think it's worthy because it means we're going to see more 5G on more phones, probably at a lower price point, and this is what the future is all about. This, if you're counting at home, this is basically their 3rd gen chip right now, I'm pretty sure, maybe 4th even. And here we are. You're barely seeing 5G still out there. I know we're already on that 3rd gen, so that's pretty exciting. Speaking of something that came out of left field, I found an article on Engadget the other day about a bunch of new LG phones, the K series, which is their mid-range, that they've been doing for years. And then 2020 versions of these phones are out or coming pretty soon. And lo and behold, they don't seem to suck. Not that LG phones necessarily suck, but the K series hasn't really been particularly up on my radar in terms of cool. But we have a K61 and a K51S. And the 61 has a 48 megapixel main camera and the 51S has a 32 megapixel main camera. And it looks like, I think maybe both of them have quad cameras in the back, which is, probably one is for depth or something. But yeah. Oh, the 4th one is a macro. Yeah. So it's main, ultra wide, depth sensor, and macro, which, as we know, is pretty common. Oppo is doing that. A bunch of companies are doing the 4th camera instead of being a telephoto, which I guess is expensive because of all the optics and this. You need OIS pretty much if you're going to do telephoto. It's much cheaper to put just a macro lens in there.
Which is cool. I saw it on the Moto phones before.
I think it's cool because these are phones that are going to be sold by at prepaid. You were talking previous ones have been $60 to $130. You're talking really affordable for, mostly foreign markets like Latin America and stuff. But of course, for the prepaid world, in the US, there's a lot of that going on. So,
and Motorola has definitely been the biggest player there. It seems like in the US, they have some really solid offerings, anywhere between $100 and $300. You can get really great stuff. And they did the macro lens with the G series this year too. And it was cool, it's they kind of, and so that's the nice thing about the LGs is that they're giving you, because what Motorola did is I think they like changed it up a little bit. It was like one had a macro and one had like a telephoto, and then like one had wide angle and one had macro.
Yeah, all the Moto 1 series, like there's like so many of them. I have a few of them, yeah.
But this has all four, so like
this is cool
for that price range, and it looks good. Like it's a great time to be in the mid-range.
I think
market.
so too. And look, I'm looking at these specs: 6.5-inch Full HD on the 61 K61, so that's 1080p,
and it looks great.
And the cheaper K51 has only a 720p display. At 6.5 inches, that's getting a little crunchy, but
yeah, it's a little tough.
I mean, look at these prices, you can't complain. These don't look ugly, so
no, they look good. They look good.
I had to mention it. In this case, I think it's more like the low range because the mid range to me is 250 to 300. This is even lower than that. So this is exciting. I didn't touch about this. I didn't cover this on the last show. Somehow I've either forgot or it just gotten announced during the recording of the last show. But Essential, the phone company that Andy Rubin started that gave us the PH1, has shut down. They're not going to release that gem phone. So how do you feel about that?
Well, there's really one overarching feeling, and it's just like good because, all this stuff came up about Andy Rubin and his sexual harassment and settlement with Google, and nobody wants to. No, I don't. And a lot of people, when they heard about the gem phone, were they're like, I don't want to see anything that has Andy Rubin's face or name attached to it.
I think we all feel the same way.
Yeah, so it was kind of. I mean, I'm sure that was a huge part of it because.
Well, I'm sure nobody wanted to invest in this company after this. I mean, if I kind of want to believe that, justice kind of prevails, that when people do stupid things, they should, take responsibility. And I don't feel like that's happened really there. And I feel like
no,
I feel that because of that, we're taking matters in our own hands, and hopefully or thankfully, the investors have said no, that don't want to touch that one. And it's not always the case. I mean, tech is a very, very problematic industry when it comes to these kind of things. And so, I don't know if...
Unfortunately, most industries are.
We're totally extrapolating here because we don't really know why they're folding per se. Like it could be it wasn't the investment issue, but... I don't know, when you do something stupid, you got to live with the consequences and, admit to it. And I don't think that's really happened, but maybe the living with consequences is finally happening.
Just to whatever small extent that it is happening, yes.
Yeah, right.
But also we've been like worried about how Essential's going to do since the launch of their phone. And like, how are they doing? Like every like other month it was like, or every 6 months we're like, hey, is Essential still alive? And they'd be like, oh, yeah, they're still alive. They're just not making another phone. But they're still pumping. They're still going to do software updates. They're still around. And we're like, oh, okay, well, what are they doing? And they're like, well, they're just doing software updates. So that's fine. And then everybody's like, great, my Essential phone still keeps these updates. And then he oftentimes gets these updates before the Pixels even do, which was strange. But, so that was like, it was like lingering. And then all of a sudden, like, what was it? Almost 2 full years later, the Gem device popped up. And Andy Rubin like tweeted about it, and they're like, "Oh, okay, wait a second. First of all, what is this thing? Second of all, I don't really want to see your face, Andy Rubin. But let's talk about the device.
I mean, the
real
device
quick.
I was interested in. I'm not going to lie. Like to me, different new form factors are interesting, but there's so much baggage there. Is basically what it comes down to, right? And I don't want to deal with it.
What was the point of that device, though? Really, like it looked like an Apple remote if it was a touchscreen.
Hey, you got to try it. Not to try it, okay? Like, as I said, this is kind of form factor. We're in a form factor, like experimentation era again. You remember the lipstick phone from Nokia around 2003 or 4 or whatever?
Sure.
I'm not saying it's right, but until we experiment and play and try, I think we won't know how it pans out, right? So I think this is kind of cool.
It's true. And it looked like it was supposed to be maybe one of those devices that make you use your phone less, like, kind of like the Palm phone that, just had certain functions.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something I assume.
No?
Like, I mean, no, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, I don't know if that's something I feel is a thing. Like, I think that if you want
I'm skeptical too.
If you want to use a phone less, just like, maybe get a 4G smartwatch or something and you can step away from your phone for a little while and you still have like at least the ability to take emergency calls if somebody needs to reach you or text people by speaking out, voice control, whatever. And,
Yeah, and you can filter your notifications.
I just don't feel
too.
like having a second phone or even a primary phone that, like there's a bunch of these phones that are built as primary phones that you can switch to basically to, like reduce your phone use. That's BS. Just freaking like turn on Do Not Disturb or something. Oh, that feature that OnePlus has, I think, is really cool. Like it locks you out of your phone for, what is it, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, something like that. You can set it, right? You can say like, I am choosing to lock out my phone for the next 20 minutes. And I mean, still emergency calls and stuff come in, but yeah.
Yeah. And then there's Google Envelope, right? You
Correct.
Like, put it in the envelope and you can only use it like after a certain amount of time and in certain ways, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's having a device to be secondary and somehow avoid you using your other devices is kind of stupid. And that's kind of what we saw with the Palm phone, because one of the big issues was that the Palm phone couldn't take very good pictures, and like that would make you have to take your phone wherever you're going.
It was. Right. I mean, I know the Palm guys, the people from Samsung that and formed the company, and actually one of the people that work at Palm used to work at Pebble with me. So I'm I have an affinity there, but and I like what they're doing, but I feel like the angle is wrong. The product is also slightly wrong. Like I think the product needs to be improved and could be improved, and maybe Gen 2 will bring us that. But I think it's a little misguided, but I don't want them to, not continue trying, is basically what I'm saying. Like I would love a tiny phone that's, usable, but without good battery life and a camera that's decent, it's not usable. Like I'm not against trying to reduce how much I do on my phone because it's small part, because some people might choose to do that. Or maybe some people have small hands, unlike you, Corey.
Does anybody know this about me?
I mean, it's kind of the title of the show, right? Like, yeah.
If you didn't know, I have rather large hands.
Thanks for letting us know again, Corey. I'm on board 100% on this. I like that you actually kind of took the bait there, because that was exactly where we were going with this, because we're dorks.
Was that the fifth time I've said it?
Welcome to Dorkhood, or Dorkland, or whatever you want to call it. I approve. Thank you for playing along. Thank you for playing the game.
Miriam, I wanted to ask, did you have an Essential phone?
I do have one somewhere in a box. A review unit.
It was cool.
It's a white one, which is really cool. I actually wanted the emerald and gold
everybody
was the
did.
one I was hoping.
That one.
Really if
cool
I ever
looking.
find one of those in mint condition, I was just gonna buy it because it's cool.
I begged for a review unit just to have, because I was like, this is like a piece of history. It feels like it was like a titanium ceramic phone that was like, it was like one of the more it was like the first bezel-less phone kind of at the time. Well, was the S8 out before that? Yeah, it was. The S8 did come out.
Yeah,
before
actually,
that.
the phone that came out before the Essential or around the same time was the Mi Mix. Remember?
Yeah, that's true. Oftentimes, the Chinese manufacturers definitely do something first, and then it gets mimicked on a larger scale.
Totally.
But it was a cool phone.
It was a cool phone.
Really
I think the camera was misting a bit. So what's interesting about that generation of phones, the Essential and the first gen Razr phone as well, is that even though their cameras kind of sucked out of the box, once you put the Google camera on them, it was back in business.
Also, I loved the 360-degree camera attachment. I've used that at weddings. It's a hit.
Have you ever used the Moto Mod version of that? There's a Moto Mod 360 camera as well.
I never actually used it in real life. I used it like an event once or twice. But yeah, it was cool too. It's like very useful in the same way.
It didn't, like, the only problem I had with the Moto 360 cam was that it was pretty poor in low light. But in decent light, it was actually pretty good. Of course, it's a Moto Mod, which means you're going to run a Moto Z phone, which makes you roll your eyes because the Moto Z phones are kind of like, But,
right.
I mean.
And that's funny too that you bring the Moto up, because that was the other thing about the Essential phone, was they were going to try and kind of make it a modular phone, just like they kind of
and they kind of did with that
Moto
camera
mods.
and that headphone jack that was like an attachment. Seriously, like what the hell? That was weird.
But that's all that ever came from it.
But what I loved about that phone was, as you said, the materials and the size in hand. It felt so good.
I did love the size.
Oh my god,
yes.
It was amazing.
It reminded me of like the second or third generation iPods that still had like the click wheel. Like if you remember the ones like the U2 version that was like red and black, like that era. And it had this nice heft to it. It was cool.
Yeah.
But RIP essential, RIP modular phones.
Yeah, totally. Well, module phones in general. I mean, I'm wondering if we're going to see another Z phone from Moto this year. Like, last year was the final one, the Z4.
I'm getting worried.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Last little bit. This is more of like a kind of like extra topic because it's kind of dorky and nerdy, and we're kind of nerds and I mean, I can't speak for you, but I can speak for myself.
Let's see.
The rotary cell phone. Somebody built a rotary cell phone using an old rotary pad from a real rotary phone, and then clubbed it together with an Arduino and a cellular radio into a very basic working. You can make calls using the rotary dial thing,
and you can buy it.
Yeah.
You can buy one if you want.
There's a kit for $240, but basically it was done by this woman as a DIY project, which I think is really freaking cool. Justine Haupt is her name. I will link to the Digital Trends story. You can click through and check it out. I mean, if you're just going to do voice calls, this has a little e-ink display on the back too, which I think is really cool. A curved e-ink.
Yeah, for text
basically
messages and missed calls.
Basic stuff. Very interesting. Not something I'd use as a primary device personally, but I like that she did it, and she did it all, like multiple versions. Like this is the final outcome, basically, of her trying this a few times, which I think is pretty damn cool. Because tinkering is cool.
Yeah, it is, and it looks kind of cool. Like people are definitely gonna think you're like in the CIA or FBI or something if you pull that thing out. It's got this antenna that's like actually visible. And yeah, they'll think you're in the FBI from like the 1970s, but it'll definitely still look.
It's
like
got that retro futuristic thing, like it looks like something that's modern in a way, but anachronistic and old in another way, all blended together.
You know what?
Kind of
agreed, because the side of it for that battery module, like it has a 1 to 10 battery light, which is just like 10 LEDs, 10 green LEDs. Very rudimentary, but it kind of looks like a router, like on that side.
Yep, because of that antenna. It's funny, a lot of the DIY cell modules you can use, like for 2G, 3G, and even 4G connectivity to work with, like Raspberry Pi or Arduino, all obviously have external. They don't have an antenna built in; they have an external connector, and you can plug whatever antenna you want into it. So you can plug a very thin little antenna that's embedded in the case so that you don't see an antenna on the outside. Or you can do what she did, which is like go nuts and put a real little L-shaped, antenna on there, make it more retro looking. So pretty cool.
I feel like she just made this because she didn't want to text people anymore. Like, I think she kind of said something like that to that effect.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. I mean, anybody who does a DIY thing like this, I think is an interesting character in my book, and I support. So that's why I wanted to mention it. And women in tech, it's important. As a woman myself, it's like it's hard, to get recognition on the cool things you do. So kudos to her for doing it.
Kudos, Justine.
Yeah. So there you go. You've heard all the news and our rants and raves about the Z Flip. I'm definitely looking forward to getting mine. You can't wait right now, right? Like you told me, like
I can't. But honestly, I just want to say one last thing about that.
Yeah.
I can't wait for Apple to make one.
Good luck. I think it's going to be a little while. I'm not saying it's a no, but it's always a crapshoot with Apple. It's like,
I know.
Sometimes they just decide to skip entire categories of things just because they're like, it's not worthy of us, And
I know.
on one hand, I respect
that
because then we don't get crap products. But on the other hand, I'm like, it doesn't. They always raise the bar when they do it. Like, look, when they finally got serious about cameras, which in my opinion happened with the iPhone 11 series, we're finally getting, phenomenal imaging performance out of an iPhone. It's always been good, but I don't feel that there was any point in time, maybe the iPhone 4, where it was phenomenal.
Wow. Crushing criticism. I think a lot of people would disagree with you there.
I'm sorry, but every time, they might not have been mainstream, but every time in the past, there was always an Android or other phone that was better in imaging than the iPhone.
Ooh,
every single time. The Pixels absolutely crushed the 10 and crushed the 10s.
Pixels only came around like 4 years ago.
The 10 and the 10s were crushed all the iPhones, the large size iPhones from the 6, 6S, 7, 7, and 8, all did not, in my opinion, live up to my expectations at all. Huawei did better.
I'll agree.
Samsung did better. Video is a different thing, but I still feel like for photography, the 11 is finally the one, and I'm glad they got their S together.
Okay, yeah. Preach.
Yeah,
Preach,
yeah.
bro.
I mean, look,
I'm with you.
The reality is
I'm happy too.
Imaging is a big part of what I cover, and I feel like, right now, honestly, if you want the best, like point and shoot, not have to set any settings and do anything, camera performance for like stills, it's basically a toss between the 11 series and the Pixel 4. And I think that the S20 series is probably going to be a serious player in that field as well. But I think the S10 series and Note 10 series right now are not quite in the same league. And I feel like that, Huawei is doing some really incredible things in imaging with the Mate 30 Pro and the P30 Pro from last year, and probably in the P40 Pro that's coming soon. But these are phones that you have to like tweak to get the right results out of them. And color science is one of the problems that Huawei has that I feel could be better. Whereas I think Apple particularly nails color science, and Google does a pretty good job. But I feel like that's why the combo of an iPhone 11 with a Pixel 4 XL in my case is kind of a really damn great combo right now for imaging.
Yeah, you got all your bases covered for sure.
So anyway,
now imagine if that was all foldable into one little flip phone.
You got it. That's what we need. I need to I just need to glue my iPhone 11 on the back of my Pixel 4 XL in such a way that the cameras are both free. You know what I'm saying? Like kind of staggered, and then I'm good to go. Right?
Just nail them together. Then you have a foldable iPhone Pixel hybrid.
Totally. Corey, do you want to tell the folks on the show where they can find you on social media and online in general?
Yeah, you can catch me on Twitter at real_Gaskin. You can also check me out on digitaltrends.com or on our YouTube page as well. And, keep up. We got a lot of news coming on.
That's right. Check out Corey's work. Good stuff. They have a podcast over there as well. And there's lots of great YouTube videos and stuff. So you check it out. I will link to a bunch of digital trend stories in the show notes, so check that out, folks. And you all know where to find me. I'm at Tank Girl on Twitter and Instagram. That's like the comic book character Tank Girl without the vowels. And apparently there's a Tank Girl movie potentially coming, another one. So I'm kind of stoked about that because I'm a big fan of the comic book, of course.
Dope.
So Tank Girl without the vowels is where you find me on Twitter. If you want to discuss the show, the podcast, do it on Twitter because there's no standardized way of discussing podcasts on podcast apps. It's not like you can comment on there. And so then, Instagram is where you'll find pretty pictures of phones and also pretty pictures taken with phones. There's a YouTube channel that goes with the podcast called the Mobile Tech Podcast YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com/Mobile Tech Podcast, you guessed it, you'll get a bunch of complimentary content that goes with the podcast, like hands-on videos, unboxings, that kind of stuff. If you stumble upon this show by accident and you're kind of wondering, like, how do I subscribe? Well, mobiletechpodcast.com is the URL. You can go there and subscribe. There's a bunch of links. We're also on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, pretty much everywhere. And I say we because I always have a guest on the show. You should subscribe. And if you do have the ability to rate the show or, review the show in your preferred podcast platform, please do, because it does help, spread the word, spread the good word. Of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel while you're at it. Like the videos, tell your friends, all that good stuff. And finally, I want to thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible.com has been with us pretty much since the early days, almost 2 years now or something. And I want to thank them for being our great sponsor. And there's a special deal for you folks if you stay tuned for a minute. Basically, Audible is a platform for audiobooks. If you like books and you like to read, but for some reason you're driving all day, you're on a road trip or whatever, and you can't read and you have to listen, they are the ones to do that. Like, they are the platform. Check it out. Audible has really great selection of books. On top of that, a lot of the books are read by the author. I think is really nice to have an author read their own book. You really kind of get into it. And the deal is that if you want to support the podcast, if you want to help us out, there is something in return for you, and that's the free trial that they have. They have a 30-day free trial, but ours is special because you get to keep anything that you download in that 30 days. If you don't want to sign up after that, that's cool. You don't have to, but that's the deal. So 30-day free trial, check it out. And there's a link in the show notes below. It's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. If you want to support us, please click through, sign up for Audible, try it out for a bit, see if you love it, and that'll help us out. So thanks to Audible for being with us since the beginning and being a great supporter of the show. And Corey, thanks for being with us on the show today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Miriam. It was so much fun.
Yeah, so we'll have you on again. Like, there we go. We'll make it happen.
It's a date.
Yeah, so no MWC. Tomorrow was the day I was supposed to fly out, but it's not happening. So we'll have a bunch of phone launches in March, I'm pretty sure. So stay tuned for that, right, Corey?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. They got to launch somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So, folks, we'll have another show next week. So come back and we'll talk to you then. Cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.